Well, good afternoon. My name is David Baulcombe from the Department of Plant Sciences in the University of Cambridge, and I'm going to talk to you about plant biotechnology and the opportunities for filling important gaps using this technology. Now, I know that many of you will have come, if you're in the biomedical field, from the perspective of pharma and using animal technologies and so on and so forth, and plant biotechnology might have passed you by in the past. What I want to do this afternoon is to try and persuade you that actually there are plenty of opportunities for major gaps to be filled using plant biotechnology. Now, you'll all be aware of one major plant biotechnology that is agriculture, and the image that agriculture has in many people's mind is of a sort of welly boots trade or profession that is relatively low tech. You're dealing with potatoes and tractors and stuff like that. In actual fact, of course, agriculture is an important part of plant biotechnology, but plant biotechnology addresses more than food and materials production through agriculture. As I'll explain this afternoon, there are opportunities in healthcare. There are opportunities in healthy diet. Importantly, and I think this is one of the most exciting areas, there are environmental opportunities from plant biotech. And then I'll talk as well briefly about industrial biotechnology with a plant biotechnology basis. So first of all, let's think about healthcare. So many of you will be aware that already there are a lot of healthcare needs and pharmaceutical needs that are provided by plants, and probably one of the most spectacular is through the production of artemisinin from Artemisia annua, a green plant. This is an anti-malarial medication. The science behind this and the practice behind this was developed many years ago. It's part of traditional Chinese medicine. But the yields of artemisinin are relatively low from the natural wild species of plant. And so there are huge opportunities for increasing the yield and the productivity of this compound by improvement of the plant species. So you could think of this as traditional pharmacology, if you like, but supercharged using the sorts of opportunities that we have in plant biotechnology that I'll talk about in a few minutes. Other opportunities using plants for healthcare, illustrated very nicely by a company based in Norwich. And what they use is a transient expression system in the leaves of an Australian weed called Nicotiana benthamiana. And what they do is to transiently express compounds or proteins in the leaves of this weed. And then they harvest the leaves and extract the active proteins. One of their most elegant applications is actually to present antigens on the surface of plant virus particles, so that these plant virus particles can then be used as vaccines against animal and human diseases, for example. So we've got opportunities in healthcare, both by enhancing traditional pharmaceutical production in plants, but also getting new ways of producing bioactive compounds in plants. Healthy diet. This is, so we all know about eating 5 a day and so on and so forth, but what we want to do is to increase the opportunities and the variety of nutritious food that we can get. So it's a fact of life in agriculture that most of the crops we eat are a handful of different species. So rice, corn, wheat, potatoes, soybeans. But of course, there are thousands and thousands of species out there. And for those of you who've read the works of Tim Spector, you'll know that our diet is healthier the more species are represented in the diet. Here is an example of a plant, Physalis, which is otherwise known as ground cherry. It's a very nutritious little seed, little fruit, very flavorsome, and it hasn't been grown very widely until now because the plant is essentially a wild plant. It's straggly and difficult to cultivate. But there's a group in Cold Spring Harbor and at the Boyce Thompson Institute in the USA, and what these guys have done is to improve ground cherry so that it's much easier to cultivate. I'll talk about how they've done that in a moment. And there are lots of other examples. So golden rice is a very famous example of where nutritious food has been made by modifying existing foodstuffs, and there are plenty of others. So there are huge opportunities in the healthy diet sphere using plant biotechnology. Environmental gaps. This is a really big opportunity that we've got because there is scope for tackling grand challenges in plant biology that will radically alter the way that we grow plants here. This slide illustrates how we can genetically engineer crops so that they may have improved fertilizer uptake, or eventually so that they may even fix nitrogen themselves, so that they won't need to have nitrogen fertilizers applied to them. The environmental benefits of this sort of thing would be huge. I could have shown you slides that would illustrate how the photosynthetic capacity of plants can be massively enhanced. The benefit of this is not only in the productivity of the crops, but also it makes us think about using crops and agricultural systems as a carbon sink. Huge amounts of carbon stored in soil. Of course, trees are a carbon sink. So if we want to have carbon sinks, if we want to reduce the greenhouse gas content of the atmosphere by having enhanced photosynthetic plants, is one way towards doing this. Just briefly to talk about industrial biotechnology and also to mention algae. Algae are plants. There are great opportunities for engineering algae so that they can produce either biofuels or perhaps high value industrial biochemicals that can be used as feedstocks in other aspects of industrial chemistry. So this too is an opportunity in plant biotechnology. So what's special about plants? Well, what's special about plants is that what we're doing by developing biotechnologies based on plants is just modifying something that we do already. We already grow plants. It's called agriculture. And what we're doing in these various innovations is simply refining the existing process. We're not inventing a new process from scratch. We're refining the processes that are executed already. An attraction of plants, of course, is that they are energy source independent. You don't need to apply energy compounds to the process because of photosynthesis, the ultimate green technology. I should mention that the opportunities in plants are not only from the ingenuity of people identifying where there are gaps that can be filled by plants, but there are a number of disruptive technologies that have yet to be fully exploited in plants. So there's an understanding in plants and crops that the microbiome, the soil microbiome, and the microbes that are living on the surface of the organisms are just as important as the gut microbiome is to the health of humans and animals. And various groups and companies are just beginning to get on top of the opportunities from microbiomology. There's gene editing. Gene editing works wonderfully well in plants. There are various technologies afoot that are helping to streamline the application of gene editing technologies in plants. And there is the link between plant biotech and other areas of technology, for example, robotics and engineering. And this too has the potential to hugely enhance the efficiency and reduce the environmental impact of these plant biotechnologies. So is it going to be plain sailing if you want to set up a company to do this? There are plenty of opportunities. You will have to deal with regulation. Unfortunately, in plant biotechnology, it has until now been over-regulated, particularly in certain parts of the world, such as Europe, although I think there's a good prospect that the regulatory landscape will become more rational in the near future. Another barrier to the development of plant biotech is in the structure of markets. Many of the benefits that I've mentioned to you are in the context of, let's say, diseases that affect less developed regions, where you haven't got billion-dollar markets with which to reap a return. So there needs to be some lateral thinking as to how we can use and develop the technologies so that they can cause or give the benefit to humankind that they really should. The same is true with environmental benefits. Many of the environmental benefits don't themselves, or at least with markets and subsidies and so forth structured as they are at the moment, the environmental benefits don't necessarily bring a financial return. And so we need to have a think as to how markets are structured so that that return can be brought into the industry. And finally, the barrier to the development of plant biotechnology is talent. And that's where I hope talking to this audience will help out. There's plenty of talent in the field already, but there are plenty of opportunities for new talent. And I hope that at least some of you listening to this presentation and this session will be inspired to come into plant biotechnology. So thanks very much for listening.